Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, we're talking to Paul Walker Jr. Paul is a one-man show at a public radio station in, of all places, McGrath, Alaska. That is rural. Chris Tarr joins us. We're talking about one of the challenges of broadcasting in such a rural place and taking care of several transmitter sites to boot. It's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionics Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to you and everything else. Just I hope you're enjoying the season. I'm Kirk Harnack here in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, where it is a typical cold and cloudy December day as we approach Christmas Day here. And it's is it freezing? No, it's above freezing. Okay, so it's not that terrible outside. I guess we'll be all right. We got a show just before Christmas to talk about. We're going to head close to the North Pole. We'll introduce our guest in just a minute. But first, let me bring in my lovely co-host. He is beautifully adorned today, and that's Chris Tarr from Mukwanago. Hi, Chris.
Beautifully adorned. Well, that's certainly a new one. Hello there, Kirk. Glad to be here. It's kind of a weird, it's weird because we've got like these two kind of long weekends coming up, and I can't remember what day it is compared to relative to Christmas. So I've been kind of running around. I've got and all these last minute projects get done before the end of the year. So then when you said, well, let's we're going to do TWiRT a different time, I'm like, yeah, why not? I mean, that's my week is messed up. Let's just throw another wrench in those whole works. So
sure, why
here
not?
I am, hey, what the heck? I'm already completely confused this week. So let's go ahead and just, change things up even more. So anyway,
we're doing.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm here. It's a, gloomy kind of, 40-degree day here in Wisconsin too.
Well, you and I, Chris, are doing the show at 12 noon on Thursday, December 21st. Have you had lunch yet or not?
I have not. Actually, if you see, I literally just got out of the shower.
Oh, okay.
I got up and I was like doing some work this morning in my office. And that's a nice thing about having an office at home. I just got up and walked over and sat down, did some work. And I went, oh, geez, I got to be on TV here in a little bit. I suppose I should at least take a shower. It is Kirk, but I figure I'll show a little respect and get a little cleaned up,
Well, I got up this morning, did a few emails for work, very important because we're still at work. I know a lot of work doesn't get done this time of year. And then we had a really good experience earlier today. Carmen and I went to the office of Nashville Electric Service to add her name to the electric bill account. And this is also in support of her immigration status. We're trying to get the Immigration Naturalization Service to, approve her and get the green card and all that. Carmen, my wife, is from the Dominican Republic and overstayed her visa. That's not news. That's So anyway, we're working on that. And if you go to Google and read the reviews of Nashville Electric Service and their customer service department, terrible, just terrible, awful. And so I'm like, okay, I said, Carmen, we're going to be the super sweet, super nice. We're going to have big smiles and wish everybody Merry Christmas and see how it goes. We got in there. Our butts had not warmed the waiting room chairs till they said, Mr. and Mrs. Harnack. So, okay. So we got up, we went over to the gentleman behind they have to have glass dividers and all that, deal with a lot of customers, maybe some irate being an electric utility. And this gentleman, lo and behold, spoke Spanish. And he said he speaks Spanish because his wife is from like Venezuela or something. So anyway, we had a terrific experience with this public utility, Nashville Electric Service, and I'm just delighted about it. And I get to post a glowing review of how wonderful they were at their office in stark opposition to most of the reviews.
It got me, you just made me think about this. I've been putting in fiber at all my transmitter sites, and, I've done a lot of AT&T and, the big companies. And then now thanks to the rural broadband fund, there's a lot of smaller operators out in the sticks, which is where a lot of my sites are. So I found out that there was fiber available at one of my transmitter sites, literally in the middle of nowhere, local company. I call them without doing any paperwork. They're like, "Oh yeah, we'll meet you out there on Tuesday." And I get out there, and they're there. And while they were there, they ran the fiber down the street, trenched it right up to my building, and within an hour, I was up and online. And static IP, the whole, and it from start to finish was a week. Now, I just dealt with AT&T at a different site, and it was a 4-month project to get it done. Yeah. These guys had it done literally ordered it the next week. The next week they were there. 2 hours later, I was online with internet, and I'm paying AT&T $500 a month. I'm paying these guys $99. So it's just crazy. But just the nicest guys. We hung out, we were just chatting about tech stuff, and it was great.
And sometimes these delays are out of their control. We had a couple big delays, and the delay was getting the local government to approve trenching under the sidewalk. In one case, the freaking sidewalk. Yeah. They had to get a permit or under the road, and I can understand that. But it took almost a year to get fiber internet at one of our sites, and all I had to do was go under the sidewalk. That was it. That's crazy.
And this AT&T one that I'm dealing with, they had fiber there. It's at a cell tower. So I mean, there was already fiber in the, already in the vault and everything, and they just couldn't get their stuff together to get it
Same
done.
thing in Oxford, Mississippi. And I don't want to badmouth C Spire because they're generally been pretty good to deal with, but fiber right there on the site at the cell tower, feeding several other companies, and we asked for a fiber drop, and it was months. And anyway,
I think it's just, with those larger companies, there's so many levels of bureaucracy there that, when something doesn't go according to script, it just throws everything off. Whereas, this guy I was talking to at the rural fiber place, he's like, yeah, I'm one of 6 employees.
Wow.
He's like, chances are if you call for support, you're going to get me. So, that's the difference.
Well, speaking of scripts, our guest doesn't have one and never has. He shoots from the hip. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so delighted to bring in a guest that I've wanted for a long time to talk to him. If you know him, you love him, he's a little bit out there. And it's Paul Walker from McGrath, Alaska. Paul, welcome in. Good to see you, man. Happy holidays.
Oh, happy holidays, Kirk. That was a lovely, lovely intro. Yeah, I'm a little out there. I'm a little weird, but want to say it's an honor to be on TWiRT and get to talk to you and Chris, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about what we do up here.
Well, we've got some technical things we're going to be asking you, and you've got technical answers, as you and I talked about them yesterday. And I think Chris and I are going to be really eager to hear some of the interesting engineering things that you have to put up with, the things that you have to do in rural Alaska. And boy, my goodness, it is rural where you are. You can't drive to your town, can you? You can't drive a car there.
No, we are about 250 miles northwest of Anchorage. We're about 200 miles off the road system.
Wow. Now, people have cars in your town, right? Because there's roads in the town.
Oh, absolutely. And some people have some very nice cars. But on that subject, one reason we don't have RDS with KSKO is most of the vehicles are so darn old, RDS would be useless out here.
Wow. Well, we're gonna get into it with Paul. Go ahead.
I do have to ask, Paul, what's more remote, where you're at now, or Abbeville, South Carolina, or wherever that was you're at?
Oh, this by a country, by a whole country.
Oh, okay. I had to know. I had to ask.
This is way far remote. 75-cent a kilowatt hour electricity, $8.50 a half gallon of milk. So yeah, way more remote.
we all share something right now. Chris Tarr, Kirk Harnack, and Paul Walker all share something. It is December 21st. Isn't today the shortest daylight of the year in the Northern Hemisphere? Isn't today the winter solstice?
Is that today or tomorrow?
Sometimes it's tomorrow. So sometimes it is.
Depends where you're at.
I guess we should Google that. Winter solstice. Thursday. Yeah. The solstice actually is at 10:27 p.m. I don't know what time zone. Oh, Central Time. 9:27 p.m. So yes, today is the winter solstice. It is today.
We have started gaining a minute of daylight every day now, just about.
Gotcha. All right, we'll tell you what, we're going to hear from our sponsor, Nautel, and I think Chris and Paul would both agree with me. Not only is Nautel a really cool company, they make great products, great transmitters for the broadcast industry, and I've recently had the pleasure of putting an HD system in at my new station in Oxford, Mississippi. But now that we're, a lot of us are in our man caves, we're kind of huddled in for the holidays, and right now is a great time for you as an engineer, as an engineering professional, to go catch up on some of their webinars from Transmission Talk Tuesdays. A lot of these are still absolutely evergreen. In fact, most of them are, with topics like transmitter site considerations for air handling and cooling, for antennas, lines, and combiners, for what's going on with EAS, what do you need to be aware of, for proper grounding. And Jeff Welton loves to talk about that because it's important. A lot of problems have been caused by improper grounding. A lot of damage has been caused by improper grounding. HD radio from the ground up. If you haven't done HD radio yet, or you need a little refresher, that's a topic of a Transmission Talk Tuesday. Another one, thermal imaging devices. Also, how to use a spectrum analyzer. What about Smith charts? How to use those, and how are they important to helping you understand a transmission system? Site stories about different transmitters. Some of what we do here on our show. Getting ready for winter. Well, it's kind of time to be there, I suppose. And so lots and lots of things. Oh, even AC power bills. How to talk to your electrician about making sure you've got the right AC power in your building and that it's connected properly and you're getting billed for it properly. Maybe there's a program available for you since broadcasters, at least FM broadcasters and TV broadcasters, we tend to use the same amount of power all the time. And I know there's some power companies that may qualify you for a better price because you're not demanding higher and lower power. You're sucking down the same amount of power all the time. So there's lots of things to consider, and Nautel helps bring that information to light through their webinars and Transmission Talk Tuesday. So check it out, nautel.com/webinars, and we will announce for you when the next new Transmission Talk Tuesday is coming up. But if you haven't seen one, and there's a lot of them on there, if you haven't seen one, it's still new to you. There's plenty there that I should go review, and given a little time this holidays, maybe I will. All right, we're here with Chris Tarr and Paul Walker. Paul, let's see. We're going to jump right into this. We got a number of topics to plow through, so let's go ahead and get right to it. One thing that a lot of engineers ask you, Paul, is what about iced up antennas? What happens to your SWR? How big of a problem is that in Alaska? Go, Paul.
Well, where I am, it's not a problem at all. We see a fair amount of snow. Not as much as you'd think, but a fair amount of snow. Doesn't really end up sitting on the antenna. We do get a good amount of frost. We don't have a lot of freezing rain because it's either too warm or too cold for that. And our antenna is Broadband Scala FMO. So I think that helps a little bit. We run 180 watts TPO for 90 watts ERP. And the most SWRs I've ever seen are 2 watts. Most of the winter, it's 1 or 0. And the transmitter just keeps chugging along. And I've never even had a red light show up on it because of anything like that.
Wow. That's surprising. In Mississippi, my stations are a world away from your weather that you have in Alaska. And we get, not every winter, but some winters, we get terrible freezing rain. So it comes down as rain, but on the ground, the antennas, towers, everything is below freezing. So as soon as that rain hits the antenna, it freezes, and we get big ice buildup. Chris, what about you? You're kind of between Mississippi and Alaska's latitude.
I am, and I think one of the fortunate things up in Paul's area is it's not really as cold as I think people think it is, but also again with those lower powers that that icing isn't as much of an issue. I do have it here. Obviously, in Wisconsin, we do a lot of de-icers and radomes. We also tend to tune our antennas a little bit on the high side of the frequency so that as they ice up, they come down a little bit and stay resonant. So it is something we deal with. And honestly, the past few years, our winters have been milder, which means we've had a lot more freezing rain. And, when you're getting into areas like this, where, for example, we've got an antenna, a 600-foot antenna on a 1,000-foot bluff, that steel attracts a lot of ice. So, we deal with it here. Probably, I would guess probably more than Paul would deal with in his particular part of town. Although I think, Paul, you probably deal with winds a lot more, don't you?
A little bit. We deal with it, but that doesn't pose a problem for much of anything, really, in my infrastructure.
I got a question. Paul, you mentioned that at your main station there in McGrath, you have a broadband antenna. Did you mention that it's a single bay broadband? Is that right?
It's a Scala FMO turnstile.
Okay, and why do you know why they have a broadband antenna? I'm glad you do, but why was that chosen?
I can only guess, but maybe so we could, like, if we ordered a couple, we could share them between sites. Like if we ordered one as a backup, I worked at another station in Alaska, and almost all of the stations are within 3 megahertz of each other with a few exceptions, and they're using an antenna that can handle that 3 megahertz difference. So they have one on standby and can send it to any site. And I have to figure that's why we used it here, because of stuff like that.
And I got to imagine too that in situations like this where it's not particularly you can't really get things shipped out pretty quickly, to have broadband antennas sitting around, because again, you don't really need to worry about covering a huge area with one transmitter. You guys tend to use lower powered transmitters all over the place. You're not having to squeeze every ounce of performance out of a antenna system like a full power FM in the down here would do. Up there you're looking at a couple hundred watts to just cover the community you're in, and so you're not really concerned about the efficiencies of a tuned antenna, but you certainly get a lot more benefit from having a broadband antenna, I would imagine.
Chris,
it's less, the Scala is a little less expensive. It's easier to ship. It's easier to put together. And we do just fine with the coverage we have. We have some stations that are 50 watts at negative height above average strain, and it covers all that counts.
Wow. Chris, do you yourself at your stations, do you have any broadband antennas?
Yeah, most of the translators I have are using things like the Nikon BKG, which is broadband. Because again, at those power levels, having a tuned antenna doesn't really get you a lot of performance enhancement. Again, at that low power, you can only squeeze so much out of it, and there becomes a trade-off, as I'm sure in Alaska is the same situation. There gets to be a trade-off between the return on investment on that. The difference between, for example, a broadband Nikon antenna versus a tuned Shively antenna is there's pretty steep difference there. So as a practical matter, using things like a Scala or that sort of thing, broadband antenna with lower power stations, really, I think is probably a wiser way to go than to dump a whole bunch of money into, a Shively or something like that. Again, situations are dependent. I do have some sites where the translator is really critical, and in that case I have done a Shively, but then there are others where it's right in the middle of the population area, so a broadband antenna works just fine.
And I never had experience with a broadband antenna until Larry Fuss, my business partner, bought. I guess we came into possession of a translator and the people who built it had a broadband antenna. And whoa, we've used the heck out of that thing as a backup when all of our other antennas are iced up in Mississippi, which doesn't happen very often. When it does, it's terrible. And like a Nautel typically putting out 7,000-8,000 watts only wants to put out 300 watts to be happy. Okay, well, we put it on the broadband, and it works great.
And I'll tell you, I always sweep our antennas before we put them online, and and as a practical matter, just looking at the transmitters, I'll put out 300 watts with 1 or 2 watts reflected on a broadband antenna. So, they match well. And I think, and again, I'm sure Paul will talk about this in a little bit, when you're engineering and trying to run radio in such a remote area, anything you can do to standardize and make things do multiple things is always a benefit.
Well, we're going to talk about backups in a few minutes and how Paul handles backups and how he handles he's got more than one transmitter site. He's got a few. So that's coming up here in just a minute. We're also going to talk about how he gets internet, and he just improved his internet situation for our show. So I appreciate that. You're watching This Week in Radio Tech with Kirk Harnett, Chris Starr, and Paul B. Walker Jr. from McGrath, Alaska. And we're going to be asking Paul here in just a minute about some of the real challenges about operating in rural Alaska. And oh my goodness, it's rural. So our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcast Bionics and their terrific system for putting your control room, your talent on the air pretty much automatically with Camera One. We'll be right back.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics. Designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need 1 camera for a studio wide shot and usually 1 camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
Big thanks to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And hey, Camera One's not all they have. They got a whole suite of software and some hardware products to help you produce really award-winning radio, and they are involved in radio very heavily. They're located in England. They work with all the major broadcasters in England and around Europe, and then, of course, with plenty of them in the U.S. as well. So I encourage you to check them out at bionics.co.uk or bionic.radio. All right, it's Kirk Harnett, Chris Starr, and Paul Walker. We're talking about broadcasting in Alaska. Paul, let's look at what we want to talk about. Oh, yeah, satellite internet. So you've mentioned HughesNet and Starlink, and talk to me about internet and the challenges you have there.
It can be a real problem. For the longest time, where I am, the only internet that was available was Viasat and really, really bad DSL. Like, just imagine the worst DSL you could think of. And that's how we were feeding our web stream. and our rebroadcast stations. And some communities, there's one or two communities we serve that have actual DSL that's not too bad. Viasat, for what it is not too bad, and it's better than you think, but not as good as we'd like it to be. But we are using Starlink for our web stream. That's what I'm talking to you on now as well. And our web stream is what feeds the transmitters. And Starlink has made my life so much easier when it comes to internet related work or issues.
Indeed. Tell me about the reliability of the Starlink, because you can go online and find a map. In fact, let me give Suncast a little project because he's not nearly busy enough. If you Google Starlink map, Suncast, I should have provided you a link earlier. You can find a live-looking world map, and then you can kind of turn it and zoom in on the area of Alaska, and you'll find there are very few satellites over Alaska, but there are enough. And so, Suncast, if you could do that little homework and butt in with that when you find it. So, talk to me where I'm curious, because in areas where Starlink is supposed to serve well, it's reasonably good. Some of my colleagues at Telos Alliance are using it because they live in rural areas. But where you are in Alaska, there are very few satellites passing over. I guess it's enough. Paul, talk to me about that reliability.
The reliability is amazing. It was pretty shoddy to begin with when it first launched for us about a year ago. We'd have multiple minute outages all day long. In the morning and in the evening, we'd have an hour or two. But now it is so good that I have gone 12 hours with no outages whatsoever. The Starlink app will tell me that it has 3 different categories that would indicate a problem: a network issue, no connection, I forget what the other one is, and all 3 of those categories combined will tell you how long you've been without service in any given 12-hour period. And there are days when I've had no outages in 12 hours, but typically it's between 10 and 20 seconds, but they're so short unless I'm watching a very high def movie, I never notice it.
So you can see we've got the Suncast. Thank you so much for getting that up there. That's what I was wanting to look at exactly. And I see there are 3 uplink sites in Alaska, one in Fairbanks, one in or near Nome, and one way up there in the north. I can't pronounce the name. I can't see it at the moment. But this is pretty much real time of the estimated satellite's position as they move around. But there are not too many over Alaska. So I'm impressed that it works as well as it does. So you're happy with the service, aren't you?
Absolutely. I did a speed test a couple of days ago. I had 205 megs down, 45 megs up, and latency at 65 milliseconds. Compare that to Viasat, which was 20 to 30 down, 3 up, and latency of about a second.
Well, doesn't Viasat do that with like one bird? And Starlink has, I don't know, 3,000 or something.
Exactly. Exactly. And Starlink has, in the last year, obviously, as they've added more satellites, the speed has gotten a little more consistent, has gotten faster, and the latency has dropped. I've had people tell me in the lower 48 who have like cable or whatever, or DSL, I have better internet than they do in the lower 48.
Actually, I was wrong by a factor of about 2. There's right now about 5,500 Starlink satellites, and they're going for 12,000, possibly as many as 42,000 satellites. I can't imagine. That's got to cause other problems. Can you imagine stargazing, trying to? I don't know. They got software now that eliminates or tries to reduce that. Chris, you got any interesting rural satellite, or have you just getting fiber everywhere, buddy?
Yeah, again, the rural broadband funding here, at least in the lower 48, has been great for us because, in all the rural area, I just now, I think, finished getting my last transmitter site hooked up with fiber. So now it runs the gamut in prices and availability and speeds, but we've been very lucky here. And of course, that I think in Paul's situation, things are getting better for him for those same reasons that all of a sudden now that's become a priority. And, I think, Paul, really can attest to this better than I can, that, how important good broadband is no matter where you are anymore. I mean, it used to be, it was a luxury and, hey, if you can afford it, that's great. But it really has become, I mean, think of your life if you didn't have decent broadband, I mean, my TV now is broadband. My, everything I do is online. And I think that's the case for 98% of the world. So, to be able to have that is amazing. And although like you, I always wonder, it's like, how, what do you do with all those satellites in the sky? It's got to be strange trying to even, like if you're doing a rocket or a space shuttle or something, trying to figure out where to go to not hit one of those suckers.
Traffic jam.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Paul talking about some, his trials and tribulations with internet before Starlink, and his story is the same as many people who've gotten it, which is it does so much to improve, the quality of life in the areas where they're available.
Absolutely. Hey, I'd love to beat each topic to death. Let's move on to another satellite topic, though, and that is NPR. You guys are an NPR affiliate there in McGrath, and talk to me about any difficulties you have with C-band satellite reception, Paul.
The only difficulty is I have to remember to brush the dish out of snow. I have learned, unfortunately, the hard way that dishes in Alaska can collect snow and enough of it to knock out the signal.
Even though your dishes are kind of aligned like this, right? They're well, I guess NPR moved to a different. Well, I don't know. Tell me about the angle that your dish is looking at.
It leans a little bit. It leans back just enough that the snow piles up. And I have to get a big old snow rake on a 5-10 foot extent and brush the dishes. And I never escape getting snow on my head or in my face when I do it because of how they're laid out. It's just hard for me to escape that, to be able to get the snow out and not hit any of the wiring of anything nearby.
What your dishes are, first of all, they're elevated way above the ground, right? Why is that?
One is the NPR dish is, and I have to figure it's partly to keep it free and clear of snow, moose, and because if the cables were buried in the ground and you had to work on that, you'd be SOL.
I think Alaska is the only place where you have to worry about moose fade.
Moose fade.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm sorry. I got to plow on because there's more stuff I want to know. Talk to me about, well, first of all, how many other transmitter sites do you have? How's your station's footprint laid out across part of rural Alaska? Tell me about that.
We have 6 transmitter sites to my south and southwest. They're about 100 to 125 miles away. We have that's 6 of them that way, and then we have one about 15 miles to my northeast, and some might say that's great. That's a big spread. And in the lower 48, 100 miles is a different state or 2 miles away, but Alaska's really the biggest little state. And people here in McGrath have family and business relations in Shagluk, 125 miles away. We're all connected, and that's why we have those transmitters there.
So STL, what are you doing for STL? You got any 950s or internet? How's that work?
We are using a Comrex Bricklink, and that is connected to Starlink. And if you were to go to our website, KSKOpublicradio.com, the high quality stream is also what we are feeding our I call them rebroadcast stations, because they are stations, not translators. They could, but don't originate programming. And at the receive sites, it's a barracks box and satellite or wireless internet.
Do you have a fair amount of buffering dialed in, or do you find that makes an improvement difference or not? What do you focused on when you're setting up a link to be reliable?
It depends on the receiving. It depends on the sending and the receiving end. We do have some buffering built in, because when we were using Viasat for our outgoing here at KSKO World Headquarters, Viasat started to get really, really bad, and we had stream guys build in a bit of a buffer. We do, I think it's about 30 seconds or so.
Oh, that much. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, we're having a good time talking to Paul Walker. He is in McGrath, Alaska. We have yet to talk to Paul about things like, how does EAS work when you're miles from anybody else? We're going to look at what power bills are like there, what kind of class of licenses that you have, what kind of backups you have. And I'm curious about transportation. You can't drive from one town to another. There ain't no road. So I noticed that these towns have airstrips. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. You're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech. Chris Tarr is along, and I'm Kirk Harnack, and we're going to talk to you for a moment about our friends at Inovonics. Inovonics, man, what a great selection of superlative, well-engineered products. And the newest one is a triple tuner. It's I believe it's the model 677 triple tuner from Inovonics Broadcast. You can find their website at inovonicsbroadcast.com. The triple tuner for AM, for FM, and NOAA weather radio. It is now shipping, and it's a great EAS receiver, or if you just need some off-air monitoring done, it does that as well, obviously. It has 3 built-in discrete frequency agile receivers. Each one is programmable. You don't have to pre-order it this way. Each one is programmed for AM, FM, or NOAA weather reception. Each receiver has its own independent outputs, so that's awesome. It has easy front panel setup with a jog wheel menu navigation, just like so many of their products do. On the back panel, 6 rear panel GPOs can be user assigned to alarm functions. So if you're no longer picking up a station you should be, hey, you can get an alarm for that. The dynamic web interface provides control and monitoring remotely via any web-enabled device, including your phone. In addition, remote listening by web stream, along with alarms notifications by email and SMS. SNMP, hey, that's fully supported. I think Chris will like that. And this is just hot off the press. I mean, this a new product, and you can tell by the width that I think you can fit 2 of these in a rack if you need more than one. I will say that the web interface, like so many of these from Inovonics, is super easy to use. It's very thorough, very complete, gives you lots of information, like on each tuner. Of course, it shows you the frequency, but it also shows you the RSSI, the received signal strength indication, the RF signal to noise ratio of that carrier that you're listening to. It shows you the audio level on a bar graph meter, and you can set up warnings for audio loss or low signal, that kind of thing. It'll also pick up RDS, so you can check that out too. It does have room for 2 power supplies, so you can plug in 2 separate 12-volt supplies to the back of it. I love that. So you can have this thing be super reliable and plug those, external 12-volt supplies into 2 different AC sources, and that way you're going to keep power to this thing and have a much easier time doing that. Analog outputs, of course, and 3 F connectors for the incoming antenna connections too. So Inovonics Broadcast has this, the Model 677. It's available from your favorite broadcast dealer. And for me, for you too, your favorite broadcast dealer ought to be Broadcasters General Store. Their website is bgs.cc. Oh, there it is on your screen right there. BGS has, and they got what you need. You need it for broadcast, including things for TV. They got a great selection of TV products to, if you want to do Friday night high school football, you want to do cameras in your studio, they got that too at Broadcasters General Store. I like to call them. They have always been very phone oriented. And in this day of, getting into menu trees and IVRs that you really don't want to be in and getting in voicemail jail and voicemail hell, they don't do that at BGS. You get to talk to a live person, typically immediately. And that number is 352-622-7700. 352-622-7700. Maybe you'll get lucky and talk to Jessica, or you'll talk to Jonathan. They're brothers and sisters. Or you'll talk to one of the other just terrific people at BGS. Thanks a lot, BGS, Broadcasters General Store in sunny and warm Ocala, Florida, where they have just this great selection of broadcast equipment and quick shipping too, and sharp pencils. Thanks, BGS, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Chris Tarr and I are along with Paul Walker. Paul's the founder of the Facebook group with almost 20,000 members. I take pictures of transmitter sites. It is a very educational and entertaining group. So you ought to check that out if you're on Facebook. All right. Paul, you touched briefly on what kind of licenses your outlying stations or all of your stations have. You said they're not translators. Isn't that right?
That is correct. I want to give some credit to your sponsor, the Big Red Barn. They are, when I need something, they are the first call and often the only call I make because they understand my situation. When I say I need it shipped out by this date and I need it shipped this way, they get it done. I never worry about, has it been shipped out? Is it going to get here? And about 2 years ago, when I needed some equipment on short notice, a month out, which is a problem here, Travis at BGS really, really saved my bacon and helped me out. So I try and, when I am making purchases, I try and deal with the Big Red Barn.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, let's switch over to getting things delivered there, whether it's from BGS or whether it's a person, maybe a brother, a sister, an aunt. Maybe it's the mail. Maybe it is your favorite bottle of whiskey. How do you get stuff to McGrath, Alaska?
Planes.
Yeah.
Our mail comes in 5 days a week. We do have a commercial airline, Reeve Air, that has, I think they're Beechcraft planes. They're like 12 seaters. They also carry our mail. But bigger things are carried on C-130 and sometimes 737 cargo planes. And for a couple months in the summer, they're brought up on a barge.
Oh, okay. So you have a river going through there, right?
Yes, the Kuskokwim River, which is where we derive our call letters and our license name, KSKO and Kuskokwim Public Broadcasting.
It looks like Reeve Air that you mentioned, it looks like their fleet consists of King Airs. Well, maybe not all King Airs, but yeah, I'm looking at their website there. Reeve Air Alaska, King Airs, and that's the right plane to use for that kind of mission. Indeed. Yep. Wow.
Yep.
I've never flown on a King Air. Chris, have you? You ever been on a King Air?
No, I don't fly much.
Okay. You like the big planes with a first class section and all that, right?
I sure do. Yep.
Wow. Well,
first class up here. First class up here is sitting next to the pilot.
Yeah. Indeed. And it looks like Reeve Air, by their promotional pictures on their website, you want to bring your dog along? No problem. Bring the dog.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, man. I love it. That's awesome. So there are a lot of flying around, and so how well, okay, let's say that you're told that there's a problem at one of your outlying cities, towns, villages, with a transmitter. It's gone off the air, or it's on, but there's no audio. What are some of the adventures you have to go through to get something back on there? Do you go yourself, or do you have contacts in each village to go look at the transmitter for you?
I wish I could go and visit it myself, because 9 times out of 10, by laying eyes and hands on it in person, I'd be able to solve most of the problems or diagnose what the problem is and get a part ordered. But in every case, in all the villages we serve, we have what we call intercompany village contacts. And we typically have 2 in each village. And it's literally just someone who's volunteered to help us out when we need it. These people have never worked in media, broadcasting. They've most times never worked in anything to do with IT or computer technology. And I am the one talking to them on the phone. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Are these lights on? Are these lights off? Are they blinking? Are they solid? What does the transmitter REV and FWD show? And what is the barracks box saying? And I know what equipment is at each site, but I may never have been there. And I've got to work off pictures and what they're telling me to try and diagnose what's wrong.
Yesterday, Paul, you mentioned that your transmitters are often located in schools. That's a common relationship you have, right? And some of the transmitters are a little hard to get to in the infrastructure of the building itself. In fact, before you allow anybody to volunteer for you, make sure they watch the movie Die Hard and they can crawl through ventilation vents so they can get to the transmitter. Is that what you were telling me?
Yeah, we have two sites in particular that are in somewhat inhospitable locations. One's not too bad. One, you walk through the gym, you go up some stairs, and it's crammed behind a bunch of heating equipment, but you can walk through no problem. But we have one site where you have to walk through the gym, you have to get on a ladder, climb up into a cubby hole that you can't quite stand up in, but you can kind of like lean over in, and then you walk through that to get to a place you can barely kneel in to work on the equipment.
Oh my gosh. Now, Chris, if you had a change of career and you were in charge of McGrath, Alaska, what's one of the first changes you would make? Maybe that transmitter site? That transmitter site, yeah.
I couldn't even, I'm a big guy. I don't think I could even make it in there. The worst I had to do was I had an AM site with, and I think I actually put pictures of it on the transmitter site page, but the antenna, it's an AM antenna on the roof of a basically a hotel. And the way you have to get up to the antenna is you climb on this old rickety steel ladder that's bolted to the side of the building with nothing behind you. So it's wide open. And you're climbing this thing, to get to the roof of the building, and you look down and you're straight down the side of the building. And even that was a little much for me. I did it, but I have some translator locations that are similar to what Paul's talking about. So it sounds to me, his situation, I'm a contractor for American Tower, and I'm what they call a site watcher. And it's kind of like what Paul has, where, if ATC needs hands on something, they call me for some of their sites, and I go and, obviously I'm a little more advanced than somebody who has no experience in it, but, I basically go and make sure contractors can get in and out. And, if they say, hey, can you check our tower light controller, stuff like that. I do that. And I have a couple of guys at some of my sites that are that way that really aren't tech guys, but if there's something that I need, I know I can call them and walk them through it. So I can certainly understand how Paul does that. I have the same thing. I have pictures of everything, and I've been to all of our sites, but it's been a while for some of them, so I have to have pictures that I can refer to and things like that.
Yeah. You do a lot of sites. Paul, talk to me and Chris about backups. What kind of backup equipment or systems do you have in place there?
We have at headquarters, we have 2 BW transmitters. Both need to go out for repair. But one is meant for a backup for KSKO. One is meant for a backup for our villages. And the one that's meant as a backup for the villages is mounted in a hard case with a barracks box in there. So we can literally put it on a plane and get it to the village it needs to go to. We have a production here at the studios. We have a production room that because we have WheatNet, could go on the air with a couple of changes and stuff like that. Our equipment is a bit old. We don't have as many backups as I would like. But we're going to be moving the studio and getting all new equipment in the third quarter of 2024, which will include things like a backup automation computer.
Paul,
Okay.
I was gonna ask you. You kind of mentioned this earlier. I want to make sure that I'm on the right line of thinking here. Are you using the barracks reflector service through Stream, guys?
I believe that's what we're using, I think.
Yeah, where you basically plug in the barracks and it just starts streaming your stations and you can control them.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that's I use that a lot. I actually created a talk show network with that system, and that is a really nice, versatile thing because you can turn any streaming box into an originator or a receiver, and so even just by that nature, you have some backup because you can just take that one of those barracks boxes wherever you can, throw it online, and you can connect to all the stations and get that done. So that's a great idea.
The barracks boxes are not always the most forgiving with shoddy internet connections. We have a couple of them that will get stupid after a power and internet outage, and sometimes they just need a reboot. If I were building, and I'm not an engineer, but I've had to kind of become one here. If I were building all of our sites today, I would put in Chimerex Bricklinks. It's more expensive, but when the internet and the transmitter site and the STL is the bread and butter of what we do, I love our Bricklink. It's just rock solid when we have good internet, and that's what I would do today.
Right. Well, and now you don't have to worry about the bandwidth considerations that you had to worry about before, because with Stream Guys and the Reflector, you send out one stream and they do all the distribution, whereas with Breaklinks, you're doing all the distribution yourself. So the hub needs a little bit more bandwidth than the barracks boxes do. So I could see at the time the barracks was probably the smart choice because of bandwidth constraints and things like that. But now with Starlink, it sounds like that really has made that kind of a non-issue at this point.
Yeah, we are feeding most of our sites with 128K stereo MP3. We have 2 sites we are feeding with 48K AAC plus. And I know some of the engineers hearing that are probably cringing, but we, at those 2 sites where we're feeding it with 48K AAC plus, we are limited to 800 megs of data in an 18-hour period. And that's the most we could do with a little bit of headroom left.
Yeah. Wow. It can be challenging that when a lot of us in the lower 48, we're used to basically unlimited internet for all intents and purposes. So when you still have some caps to deal with, and one of my stations was on HughesNet, and we found the caps to be just not compatible with broadcasting even just radio broadcasting. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack and Chris Tarr. We're talking to Paul Walker. He's really a one-man band. And you know what, Paul? Give us a 60-second view of what your job is there at KSKO. You keep saying you tell me you're a one-man show. Is that really, really real? One man?
That is about as real as it gets. My official title is program director. And that's what I was hired for, but I troubleshoot technical things. I do office work. I get the mail. I do banking things. I do social media. I do production. I do community events. I have one announcer who works 3 hours a day, but has no duties whatsoever besides being on the air. We have an office manager who works remotely, whose job is mainly paperwork and FCC stuff. But day to day, week to week, it is me and me only.
Hey, I want to hear about your power bills, and maybe you can give us a tip of the week about working in Alaska. What have you found most amazing, most interesting, most satisfying, or most disgruntling? That's coming up in a minute. Paul Walker is our guest. He's at KSKO in McGrath, Alaska, and they have other sites around the area, anywhere from 20 to 120 miles away. So I'm finding this pretty fascinating. And I've been streaming their audio. It's pretty interesting programming. They're a public radio station. They do some NPR programming, of course, and a lot of localized programming too. Chris Tarr is with us, and Chris and we typically talk about angry audio about this time in the show. Chris is a big fan, as am I. In fact, I actually stopped by their office yesterday just to say hi. And they're about literally 18 miles down the road from me. So, Chris, what do you want to talk about today for angry audio?
Well, let's talk about some disappointment with angry audio today.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Reev console has been such a hot item that people have been unable to get them. They've been unable to procure the Reev console. But I have word from on high that logjam is quickly breaking up, and in January, people should be able to get their hands again on those shiny Reev consoles. The reason why they're selling like hotcakes, like flapjacks, like they're huge, is the versatility. There's a lot of people now voice tracking from home, doing production from home, those sorts of things, and they need a radio-friendly console. The problem with using Mackies and things, they work nice, they're nice consoles, but they're not really built for radio, and therefore can be confusing and can be easy to kind of mess up, to be honest with you. So really, you want to try to find these people a console that looks familiar, that has all the features that they need for doing radio, and the Reev ticks all the boxes. It's inexpensive. It's easy to use. It has all the features like mix minus, Bluetooth connectivity, all of those sorts of really nice features that you sometimes only find on higher end consoles on a very low entry level priced console. Also, ins and outs, all Studio Hub, makes wiring a breeze. You can have one of these literally up and functioning in minutes. It's got a USB jack, so you can do your audio in and out of your computer. It is so easy to use, so familiar, and built like a tank. And I'll guarantee you it's going to be less expensive than some of those other alternatives that maybe look similar but don't have all of the features. So the Reev console, great for podcasting, great for production, even on the air. Maybe you've got a small on-air studio. We're all downsizing a little bit now with automation and things like that, and maybe you don't need a huge console in your studio. I'll tell you what, this is not... It may be low price, but it's certainly not budget. It is really a full-fledged broadcast console, but built-in power supply, nothing real fancy there, but it is built like a tank, just like every other Angry Audio product. It sounds great. All of Catfish's design goes into that. The nice transformers, the clean audio, the nice shielding, all of those things in a really nice price-friendly console. Check it out at angryaudio.com. You can get them soon from your favorite broadcast dealer as production ramps up on these. I don't think he realized how popular these turn out to be. So, that's a good problem to have, I suppose. So, I know there's some people who may be disappointed, but they'll have smiles on their faces soon. When problems come up, don't get frustrated, get angry. angryaudio.com.
Last spring, I stopped by the Angry Audio shop and Catfish, Mike Dosh, showed me how the Rave console goes together, how the top electronics mate with the bottom electronics, and it's freaking brilliant. It's so mechanically secure and just freaking brilliant to put the top and the bottom together. It's just amazing. I thought, wow, that's what a great design that is. So thanks, Chris. Thanks to Angry Audio for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, our show is also brought to you by Max Connect Wireless. You need reliable 4G LTE internet service where you get your own static IP address and prioritize packet data. Well, Max Connect Wireless has your deal, and they got literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of very happy broadcast customers. Here's Gary Morrill with a testimonial.
I'm Gary Morrill, Midwest Regional Director of Engineering for Alpha Media. When I first spoke with Josh Bone about Max Connect, he told me they'd work great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using Max Connect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. We also have times where we need to be able to get out to a venue where it's kind of challenging because everybody and his brother is trying to stream video at the same time, like at a big sporting event. And you know what? Our data gets through every time because it's prioritized packet data. It works for us. It'll work for you. Max Connect. Check it out.
And Max Connect has certainly saved my bacon and a couple friends' bacon a few times. WEVL, Memphis, Tennessee, community radio station in the middle of a fundraiser, and their big name cable service went out for like days. I ran down there with a Max Connect box, got them back on the air they were using an Omnia MPX node with micro MPX technology, and got them right back on the air in a few hours. And now they have this for their backup. So anyway, check it out. Thanks a lot. Max Connect Wireless. Go to maxconnect.com, the Josh Bone's Max Connect group, where they also do contract engineering. And if they don't already, they're about to offer tower services too. So I like them. Good people there. All right. We're in our last couple of minutes here with Paul Walker and Chris Tarr. I'll ask Chris first. Chris, do you have any tip of the week you'd like to share with us before Christmas?
No, I just, we've got a couple of minutes here, so I'll let you guys wrap up. I just want to say, thanks to Paul for joining us today. I've known Paul for many, 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 many years, and I don't know that there are many people who are as bigger cheerleaders in radio as Paul has. I followed him through his career, and he's very committed to local small town radio. He is one of those guys who goes out and does everything from engineering to, as he mentioned, paperwork and things like that. I don't know many people who love radio more than Paul. So
yeah, I agree.
I'm very, very glad he was able to join us today and give us a little bit of insight of what he's dealing with. And I wish Paul well for sure in the future with everything he's doing, because I'm sure it's going to be a wild ride.
Paul, didn't I first meet you maybe in Clarksdale, Mississippi at WROX with Jason Konars? Is that where we met?
I'm not sure we met until NAB in 2015. Oh. I'm not sure I met you. I don't believe I met you until NAB 2015.
Okay, well, either you or your body double may have been at the transmitter site at WROX in Clarksdale, Mississippi. But hey, that was a long time ago, and it may not have been you. I thought it was you, but maybe not. Okay, so I want to hear a little tip of the week from you, Paul Walker. Whatever you want to tell us and leave us, any words of wisdom or words of wonder about broadcasting in Alaska.
Two words of wisdom. If you live in a place where there's wildlife, don't use rock salt on your steps, because then you'll have moose at the porch. Okay. But the biggest word of wisdom, especially if you're in a small shop, as one would say, like I am, I have worked real hard on work-life balance and handling things appropriately. And I have a kind of a 3-tiered or so system when it comes to problems. Is it an off-air emergency, like programming is impacted, we're off the air? Fix it now. Can I put in a little workaround, and it might require 2 steps instead of 1 every day, but it keeps things going, good, do it. Don't stress about the permanent fix. It'll happen when it happens. If it doesn't impact programming and listeners won't care, then put it in the to-do pile and you'll deal with it when you get to it. And then if problems occur on the air that are not your fault, like an outside source, not my circus, not my monkeys, get something on the air, move on, and don't stress about it.
Okay. I like that. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for joining us, and it's been a pleasure, and congratulations on a very successful Facebook group. I take pictures of transmitter sites, and the last I looked, unless I was cross-eyed, over 19,000 members, headed toward 20,000 members of that group, and it's always educational to see other transmitter sites. So thank you for starting it, and congratulations on the continued success of that group.
Thank you. It was started about 15, 16 years ago when a bunch of us were hanging out in the I Take Pictures of Studios group, and in an ongoing thread, Kim Sachs piped up, well, what about those of us who have tower and transmitter pictures to post? Where do we put those? So I went looking. There wasn't anything. I started it, and here we are today.
Well, again, congratulations and good success. And people love to see transmitter sites. It's those are, studios are, I'm not saying they're open to the public, but you can go see studios. But transmitter sites, you kind of you have an inside connection. I mean, Chris Tarr won't let you in one of his transmitter sites, unless you show ID and everything and, bring some bratwurst.
No, that's just you.
Oh, that's just me. Anybody else is welcome, but Kirk, nah.
There you go. Yep.
Kirk's got to show ID. All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Radio Tech. I want to thank Suncast for being at the ready, doing a great job as usual. And it's just been terrific to be with you. I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and hope things go well for you this season. I'm looking up real quick to see what we got for you next week. Oh, yeah. Next week, we have an old friend of mine and a friend of yours. You've probably talked to him on the phone for tech support, and that's Rolf Taylor. Rolf Taylor is going to be our guest next week, and the topic, the best support is no need for it. So that's going to be interesting. We'll talk to Rolf next week on This Week in Radio Tech, and we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Thanks. Bye-bye.